He came for punishment, not mercy. The Alpha King descended into the dungeon with a heart carved from stone. To him, she was nothing more than a traitor. A weak Omega accused of a crime the pack had already judged. Chains rattled in the darkness. He barely looked at her at first. She was on her knees, head bowed, hair clinging to her face in wet, tangled strands. The stench of blood and iron filled the air. This was what happened to those who defied the pack. This was justice. Or so he believed. He stepped closer. That was when he saw the marks. Not the kind left by punishment, but the kind left by cruelty. Her wrists were raw, torn open by iron shackles that had been tightened far too long. Bruises layered her skin, old ones, new ones, some shaped like boots, others like claws. Someone had enjoyed this. The Alpha King froze. Because this was not his order. Slowly, she lifted her head, just enough for him to see her face. One eye was swollen shut. Her lip trembled, split and bleeding. Yet still. She said nothing. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She had already learned that begging only made it worse. Something dangerous stirred in his chest. Anger. No, rage. Because the pack had not been punishing her. They had been breaking her. And then he noticed the scent. Faint. Hidden beneath blood and fear. A scent that made his wolf slam violently against his ribs. His mate. The dungeon seemed to shrink around them. The Alpha King took one slow step back. Realizing the truth far too late. He hadn't come to punish a criminal. He had come to witness his pack's greatest betrayal. And what he would do next would change the fate of the entire kingdom. No one announced the verdict. They didn't need to. In the Ashenclaw Pack, judgment did not always come with words. Sometimes, it came with hands that dragged you across stone floors. Sometimes, with iron chains still warm from the forge. Sometimes, with silence so heavy it crushed the truth before it could breathe. She learned that the night they took her. It began with whispers. They followed her through the pack lands like shadows, curling behind her steps, slipping into conversations that fell quiet when she approached. Eyes lingered too long. Voices lowered. Doors closed. She told herself it was nothing. She had always been invisible anyway. An Omega learned early not to question distance. Not to demand warmth. Not to ask why others looked at her as if she carried something rotten beneath her skin. Still, something felt wrong. The night air tasted sharp, as if a storm were waiting just beyond the treeline. The pack grounds were unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that made every snapped twig sound like a warning. She had just finished her chores at the healer's hut, scrubbing blood from linens that weren't hers, when they came for her. 3 warriors. No announcement. No explanation. Just hands closing around her arms. She gasped, instinctively pulling back. Wait, what is this? I didn't do anything. One of them struck her. Not hard enough to knock her unconscious. Just enough to remind her of her place. Quiet, he snarled. You'll answer to the elders. Fear surged, sharp and sudden. The elders. They never summoned Omegas at night. They dragged her through the center of the pack, past glowing windows and flickering hearth fires. No one intervened. No one asked questions. Faces turned away as she passed, as if looking at her too long might stain them with her guilt. By the time they reached the stone hall, her heart was pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Inside, the elders waited. 5 of them, seated in a half-circle. Their expressions were carved from stone, cold, unreadable, already decided. She was thrown to her knees. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. One of the elders rose slowly, leaning on his staff. His eyes were sharp, assessing, already condemning. "You are accused," he said, voice echoing through the chamber, "of betraying the Ashenclaw Pack." Her breath caught. "What?" The word came out broken. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and unreal. "You are accused," he continued, "of leaking patrol routes to a rival pack. Of endangering our borders. Of treason. Treason." The word felt too large for her mouth, too heavy for her body. "I didn't," she whispered. "I swear, I don't even leave the inner grounds." "I wouldn't, why would I?" "Enough," another elder snapped. "We have witnesses." "Witnesses." She searched their faces desperately. "Who? Please, tell me who said this. I can explain." They didn't answer. That was when she understood. Explanations were no longer welcome. "The Alpha King is away," the first elder said calmly. "But the pack cannot wait for justice." Her heart sank. Alpha King. He wasn't here. The one voice that could have stopped this, was gone. Until his return, the elder continued, "You will be confined to the lower cells. The truth will be encouraged to surface." Encouraged. The warriors hauled her upright again. Panic clawed at her chest. "Please," she begged. "Please, I'm innocent. I've served this pack all my life. I've never broken a rule." The elder looked at her with mild curiosity, like one might look at an insect struggling in water. "Then you have nothing to fear." They took her to the dungeon. The Ashenclaw dungeon lay beneath the pack hall, carved deep into the mountain stone. It was old, older than the current Alpha, older than the laws they pretended to follow. Cold seeped into her bones the moment they dragged her inside. The air smelled of rust, damp stone, and something else she didn't want to name. They shoved her into a cell barely wide enough to lie down. Iron bars slammed shut. Chains were fastened to her wrists, tight, unyielding. The metal burned where it touched her skin. "Wait," she cried, fear spilling over. "You said confinement. Why chains?" "I won't run. I swear I won't." The warrior didn't even look at her. "You should have thought of that before betraying us." The torchlight receded. Darkness swallowed her whole. She didn't scream. Not yet. The first night passed slowly. The cold was relentless, creeping into her joints, settling in her chest. She curled into herself as much as the chains allowed, trying to make herself smaller. She replayed the accusation over and over. Witnesses. Who would lie about her? She was an Omega. Powerless. Quiet. Unimportant. Unless, that was the point. The second day, they brought her water. Not food. Just water, pushed through the bars in a dented metal cup. "Please," she said hoarsely. "Can I speak to the healer? Or one of the elders? There's been a mistake." The guard laughed softly. "Talk all you want," he said. "No one's listening." That was the day the questions began. They asked her about patrol routes she'd never seen. About meetings she'd never attended. About messages she'd never sent. Each time she said she didn't know, didn't understand, didn't do it. Each time, their patience thinned. By the third day, the chains were tightened. Her wrists bled. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. By the fifth day, they stopped asking questions. That was when the punishment truly began. It wasn't official. That was the cruelest part. There were no written orders. No witnesses. No record. Just guards who came at odd hours. Elders who looked the other way. A dungeon that swallowed sound. They struck her when she spoke. They struck her when she stayed silent. They kicked her when she collapsed. Sometimes they left her alone for hours, days, letting fear rot inside her. Other times they came in groups, their boots echoing long before they reached her cell. She learned not to scream. Screaming only made it worse. Her body became a map of pain, bruises blooming dark and deep, ribs aching with every breath. Her vision blurred more often than not. Hunger gnawed at her until it became a distant, constant ache. She stopped counting days. Time lost meaning in the dark. The only thing that remained was endurance. And hope, fragile, thinning, but stubborn. She clung to one thought. The Alpha King would return. He would listen. He would see the truth. Weeks passed. Above her, the pack lived on. They trained. They feasted. They laughed. Below, she faded. The chains bit deeper as her weight dropped. Her hair tangled and matted against her face. Infection festered in untreated wounds. Still, she refused to confess to something she hadn't done. That defiance angered them. One night, a guard leaned close to the bars, eyes glittering in the torchlight. "You're making this difficult," he said softly. "You know, if you'd just admit it, this would end." She lifted her head with effort, one eye swollen nearly shut. "I won't lie," she whispered. "Even if you kill me." For a moment, something flickered across his face. Then he turned away. The next morning, the elders met without her. They decided her fate. When word reached the dungeon that the Alpha King had returned, it came not as relief, but as dread. Because by then, she was no longer the girl they had taken. She was weak. Broken. Barely holding herself upright. And she knew something else now. They didn't intend for her to leave the dungeon alive. The Alpha King was coming to pass final judgment. And the pack had already decided what he would see. The mountain winds howled as he arrived. The Alpha King, Fenric Ashenclaw, stood at the peak of the ridge overlooking the pack hall, his cloak flapping violently in the storm that had crept over the Ashenclaw Mountains. His eyes, pale and piercing, scanned the valley below. Everything seemed calm, too calm. The pack grounds, usually alive with training and laughter, were eerily quiet. Even the scent of life in the air was muted, as if the wind itself was holding its breath. A messenger rushed to him, panting, eyes wide with fear. "My Alpha, the Omega." "They." "I know," Fenric interrupted sharply. His voice, even over the storm, carried the authority of a king. A single glance could bend the will of the strongest warrior in the pack. "Show me." They led him to the hall, through corridors faintly lit by torches that flickered in the damp, stone walls. Every step brought him closer to the dungeon, and with each step, his heart grew heavy. He had returned to his pack to find betrayal, yes, but not this. Not this, cruelty. When they reached the dungeon doors, the guards hesitated. None dared meet his gaze directly, knowing the wrath that simmered beneath his calm exterior. Fenric's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his ceremonial blade, not because he intended to fight, but because the weight of authority was in his hands, and nothing would stop him from enforcing justice. The doors opened. The smell hit him first. Iron, blood, and something more, fear, despair, and the unmistakable scent of a wolf pushed to its limits. His wolf stirred violently inside him, a storm matching the one outside the mountain walls. The bond was here. Weak. Faint. But undeniable. Chains rattled. She was on her knees, hunched over, hair matted with dirt and blood. One eye was swollen almost shut, her lips split, bruises marking her delicate skin like dark maps of torment. She didn't look at him. She didn't move. The Alpha King froze. Not in shock of her injuries, but of recognition. The faint scent, almost buried beneath the stench of blood and sweat, called to him. His wolf screamed. His mate. She was his mate, and she had been broken. A wave of anger and guilt swept through him. He stepped closer. "Fenric," whispered one of the guards, fearful. "She." "Silence," he commanded. The single word cut through the dungeon like a blade. Even the chains seemed to tremble at his presence. His eyes locked on hers. For a heartbeat, she did not react. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she lifted her head. Their eyes met. The air between them was taut, crackling with tension and fury, grief and unspoken recognition. He saw the fear, the pain, the betrayal that had been etched into her soul by the pack he ruled. She recoiled instinctively, pressing herself against the cold stone wall as if he, too, might harm her. "My Alpha," she breathed, voice trembling, barely audible. The title of mate, of bond, of destiny, forgotten in the haze of her torment, pulled at him with a force he had never known. Rage surged, hot and unrelenting, at the realization that his absence, his delayed return, had allowed this to happen. His pack, his laws, had failed her. He knelt slowly, lowering himself to meet her gaze at eye level, careful not to appear threatening. Every warrior, every guard, every elder present could feel the shift in energy. This was not a confrontation, it was a reckoning. "Who did this to you?" he demanded, voice low but commanding. The question was not just for her. It was for the pack. For the ones who had inflicted this suffering in his name. For the law that had failed to protect his mate. She flinched, trying to shrink further into herself. I don't know," she whispered. They said I betrayed the pack, but I didn't." "You didn't?" His voice cracked with anger, grief, and disbelief all at once. The chains on her wrists rattled as he reached out, loosening the iron shackles himself. The cold metal slid from her skin, leaving angry red marks. He could see every bruise, every cut, every layer of torment. "My mate," he murmured, almost to himself, as his wolf howled in response to her scent, his connection to her surfacing stronger than ever. She was trembling, not just from pain, but from the sudden awareness that he had arrived. That he knew. That he saw. The guards shifted nervously, but Fenric ignored them. Their fear, their excuses, their blind adherence to the Elder's orders, none of it mattered now. His mate's suffering was his responsibility. Every ounce of rage and sorrow within him demanded action. He lifted her gently, supporting her as she tried to resist. "I will not allow this to continue," he said, voice low but resolute. "Not in my pack. Not under my watch." She looked at him, confusion and disbelief warring in her eyes. The faintest hint of hope flickered, but it was quickly buried under layers of trauma. Why now? You weren't here." He tightened his hold just slightly, careful not to hurt her, and lowered his face near hers. "Because I was wrong to be away. Because the pack failed you. Because I will not fail again." Her wolf stirred, cautious, defensive. She backed against him instinctively, shaking. He understood. She was testing him. Testing whether he was real, whether this protection, this bond, was genuine. He leaned back slightly and allowed her space, giving her control over the moment. "I am here," he said simply. "I am here, and I will not let anyone harm you again." The guards and elders exchanged uneasy glances. No one dared intervene. Even the harshest among them understood that this was no longer just punishment or protocol. This was the Alpha King confronting the consequences of his absence, and the entire dungeon, every shadowed corner, felt the weight of his fury. She let out a shuddering breath, finally lifting her face fully. Their eyes met again. His wolf pressed against his chest, quivering with the strength of the bond and the anger that could not yet be contained. "You are mine," he said, voice low, carrying the finality of kingship and the intimacy of a mate's claim. The words were not a threat. They were a promise. She flinched at the sound of them, not understanding yet. Not ready to trust. But the seed of hope had been planted. The dungeon doors clanged open behind them. Warriors and elders stepped back instinctively, as though sensing that to remain here was dangerous. Fenric moved to place himself between her and the others, letting the world know, if anyone still doubted, that she would be protected. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small glimmer of safety. But the anger, the guilt, the lingering fear, those would not vanish so easily. He carried her out of the cell, every movement careful, deliberate. The chain marks and bruises were visible in the torchlight, and whispers filled the dungeon. Even in their fear, the pack began to understand that they had not only failed an Omega, they had failed their Alpha. Above all, Fenric's wolf roared within him. It was not merely a warning to the pack, it was a demand for justice. The vengeance that would come would be absolute. But before vengeance, there had to be healing, and before healing, there had to be acknowledgement. He set her down gently near the top of the stairs leading to the main hall. Her legs trembled, but she didn't fall. Slowly, painfully, she began to understand what had happened, he was here. The Alpha King had returned. And nothing, no pain, no injustice, no fear, would ever touch her again without his knowledge. Her breath caught in her throat. The chains were gone, but the marks remained, proof of the cruelty inflicted in her absence. Fenric studied her face carefully, memorizing every bruise, every darkened mark, every line of pain etched across her delicate features. "You are mine," he repeated softly, letting the words linger. "And no one will touch you again." Her eyes widened. Not in submission, not yet, but in the faintest whisper of recognition. Her wolf stirred, conflicted, wary. She had been broken, betrayed, and tortured. Trust was not easily regained. But Fenric knew the truth, a bond like theirs could not be erased. It had waited through weeks of torment. It had waited in the shadows, growing stronger with every heartbeat. And now, finally, it could surface. The storm outside raged on, howling through the mountain ridges. But inside the dungeon, inside the Ashenclaw hall, another storm brewed, quieter, fiercer, filled with fury, guilt, and the first fragile threads of hope. The Alpha King had returned. And nothing would ever be the same. The chamber was quiet, but the silence was heavy, oppressive, and almost tangible. Candles flickered along the walls, casting elongated shadows across the cold stone floor. The air smelled faintly of blood, iron, and the lingering scent of the dungeon below. Every corner seemed to echo with the remnants of pain that had been inflicted there, the chains, the bruises, the whispered cries that had been smothered by fear. Fenric Ashenclaw's hand rested lightly on the door as it closed behind them. The click reverberated like a gunshot, announcing their presence to no one but the silent shadows. The guards had been dismissed. They dared not stay in this room, knowing the Alpha's attention was now fully fixed on the Omega he had claimed as his mate. He placed her gently on a cot near the center of the room. She hesitated, trembling, her hands instinctively clutching at the remnants of her tattered clothing as though they could shield her from the memory of chains. Fenric's wolf stirred inside him, roaring softly, hungry, protective, frustrated, and aching. She was his. She was here. And yet, she did not look at him. Not truly. "I will not let them hurt you again," he said, voice low but firm. "No one. Not ever. You are safe now." She flinched at the sound of his words, twisting slightly as if he were the next threat. "Safe?" she whispered, voice cracked and raw. "Do you know what they did to me?" Fenric's jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides, though he forced himself to remain calm. He had seen the evidence, the bruises, the raw skin, the subtle scars that told stories even the strongest lies could not conceal. But hearing her speak, seeing her fear, hearing the tremble in her voice, ignited a rage that burned hotter than anything he had felt in years. "I do," he said simply, stepping closer. Every movement was deliberate, measured, meant to reassure yet command authority. "I saw it. I know. And I will make them pay. All of them." She shook her head, eyes wide, not out of fear of him, but disbelief. You weren't here. You let them." Her words stopped abruptly as tears filled her swollen eyes. She turned away, pressing her cheek against her knees, wrapping her arms around her body. "You weren't here when it mattered." The word struck him like a blade. Fenric sank to one knee, lowering himself so his gaze was level with hers. "I know," he whispered, almost as if confessing a crime. "I was gone. I failed you. But I am here now. I will not fail again. Not ever." She swallowed hard, attempting to steady her trembling, but her body betrayed her. Tremors ran along her limbs, and the faintest whimper escaped her lips. Fenric's heart constricted painfully. Every nerve in his body screamed to hold her, to protect her, to erase the weeks of torment she had endured. Yet he knew. He understood. Healing would not come from force. It would not come from words alone. It would come slowly, painfully, on her terms. "You do not understand," she said quietly, still refusing to meet his eyes. "They broke me, and you weren't here. How can I trust you now?" Fenric's wolf growled low in his chest. His hands itched to reach for her, to draw her close and shield her from the world. But he restrained himself. Every step, every gesture had to honor her fear, her trauma, her right to control her body and her space. "I understand more than you can know," he said softly. "I understand fear. I understand pain. I understand betrayal. And I understand that trust cannot be demanded. It must be earned. I will earn it. I swear it." She shook her head, turning away. "It's too late. Too late for comfort. Too late for safety. You weren't here, and now I am left with nothing but this." She gestured vaguely to her arms, her body, the shadows of what had been done to her. Fenric's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to promise that nothing would ever hurt her again, to sweep her into his arms and erase the weeks of torment. But he knew she would resist. And any act taken without her consent now would only deepen the scars he already feared he could never heal. He stepped back slightly, giving her space, though the air between them remained charged. "Then I will wait," he said, voice steady, controlled. "I will wait for you to decide. I will wait for you to see that I am here. That I am yours. And that I will never leave you again." Her eyes flicked toward him briefly, just enough to register his words, but she quickly looked away. The tiniest flicker of hope appeared and disappeared, swallowed by fear. Days passed. Fenric did not leave her side. Not entirely. He allowed her privacy but kept a vigilant watch. He ensured that no one entered the room without his permission. He fed her, tended to her injuries, cleaned the wounds they had neglected for weeks. Every touch, every gesture was careful, deliberate, always with her consent in mind. Yet even as he acted with patience, his wolf stirred restlessly. It was not merely protection it demanded, it was recognition, assertion, a claim that could not be denied. She resisted. Always. Every hand offered was met with hesitation, every word of comfort met with skepticism. Yet slowly, imperceptibly, she began to speak more. First, small words, whispers about the food, the room, the faint scent of pine that drifted from the mountains beyond. Then, tiny questions about him. Why weren't you here? Where were you? Fenric answered honestly. No excuses. No lies. I was needed at the borders, he said. I could not foresee the cruelty that would reach you here. But I am here now. And I will stay. She listened, eyes guarded, wolf tense beneath the surface. I don't even know who I am anymore, she admitted one night, voice barely above a whisper. They took everything from me. I feel like I am nothing. Fenric's chest ached. He knelt beside her cot, careful not to invade her space, his gaze locked on hers. You are not nothing, he said softly, firmly. You are mine. You are my mate. And nothing, no cruelty, no lies, no power in this world can take that away. Her eyes welled with tears, but she looked down, unwilling to accept the claim. Mine? You weren't here when I needed you. How can you claim me now? He reached out, a hand hovering near her shoulder, not touching, just present. Because even when I am absent, even when I fail, the bond does not break. It cannot. Your wolf knows. My wolf knows. And one day, when you are ready, you will know too. The days turned into nights, and nights into days. Slowly, ever so slowly, the walls she had built around herself began to crack. Not enough to trust. Not enough to believe. But enough for her wolf to stir, cautious and tentative, recognizing a presence that had always been hers by right, even when human fear told her otherwise. Yet the memory of chains, of boots striking flesh, of whispered lies and threats, remained sharp. Every step he took to comfort her was met with flinches, every attempt at closeness resisted. She did not forgive easily. She did not forgive quickly. And Fenric understood that the road to her trust would be long, painful, and fraught with setbacks. One evening, she refused to eat. She pressed herself against the wall, staring into the flickering candlelight. I can't, she whispered. I can't eat. I can't. I can't pretend to be okay. Fenric knelt before her, calm, steady, unwavering. Then we will wait, he said. We will wait together. I will not force you. I will not rush you. But know this, every moment you suffer alone, I suffer tenfold. And every moment you heal, I will be here. With you. Beside you. Always. Her breath hitched. A tear ran down her cheek. She did not look at him, but for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the faintest spark of relief. That spark was fragile. It was tiny. But it was a start. Weeks passed in the same slow rhythm. Fenric maintained the balance between patience and insistence, between authority and compassion. The pack outside began to whisper about the Alpha and his Omega, how she had been claimed despite her injuries, how he had returned and taken her into his protection. But in the quiet of his chambers, none of that mattered. What mattered was her healing, her cautious steps back into the world, her gradual acknowledgement that she was no longer alone. One night, as the wind howled outside the mountains, she finally looked at him without fear. Not completely, not fully, but enough to let him see the flicker of recognition, the faint pulse of bond that had survived torment, cruelty, and absence. Fenric's wolf pressed against him, sensing the subtle shift. He reached out slowly, hand hovering near her, respecting her space. You are stronger than you know, he whispered. And you are not alone. Never again. She nodded slightly, voice barely audible, I don't know if I can trust you. Yet. But, maybe I can start. It was not forgiveness. It was not surrender. But it was the beginning, the first fragile step toward trust, toward bond, toward the recognition of what had always been there, her mate. And for the Alpha King, that first step was everything. Because the path ahead was still dangerous. The pack had betrayed her. Enemies lurked. And the world they inhabited was harsh and unforgiving. But for the first time since the dungeon, she was no longer alone. And that, Fenric knew, would make all the difference. The morning light filtered weakly through the high windows of the Ashenclaw hall, dust motes dancing in the pale beams like tiny spirits. The air was thick with the smell of damp stone and smoke from the hearths below. For the first time in weeks, the Omega, Serena, could feel the sunlight on her face, though she remained cautious, hesitant, as if even the warmth of the day could betray her. Fenric Ashenclaw, the Alpha King, stood nearby, silent but vigilant. The night storm had passed, leaving the mountains sharp, jagged, and glinting with frost. His wolf had not rested, prowling within him, restless, demanding justice and vengeance for the weeks of suffering inflicted upon his mate. But he did not act impulsively. Not yet. Every move now required careful thought. There were too many variables, too many dangers hidden in the shadows of the Ashenclaw Pack. Serena watched him carefully from the cot she had slowly begun to accept as her own space. Her wrists bore the scars of chains and bruises, tender reminders of her torment. Every breath she took was deliberate, every blink a conscious act of survival. She had survived the dungeon, yes, but the pack's deception was far from over. Fenric's eyes swept the room. There had been no time for idle questions or social niceties. The Alpha understood that the truth behind the accusations needed unraveling before the pack could strike again, before their lies solidified into permanent consequences. "You need to rest," he said quietly, noting the pale skin, the tremors in her hands, the tension in her spine. "You are stronger than you realize, but you will not recover without strength. And to face the pack again, you will need every ounce of it." Serena gave a faint nod, wary but obedient. I need to understand," she whispered. Why? Why would anyone do this to me? Why would they claim I betrayed the pack when I've done nothing?" Fenric's jaw tightened. "Because it was convenient. Because you were vulnerable. Because someone saw a chance to remove a threat without the risk of punishment. Someone needed a scapegoat, and you fit the role perfectly." Her eyes widened, searching his face. "A scapegoat? Who would do such a thing?" Fenric exhaled slowly, pacing the room. Every thought, every clue, every piece of information he had gathered since his return weighed heavily on him. The pack had not acted spontaneously, there had been planning. Precision. Malice. And someone in a position of influence had orchestrated it all. "It is not simple," he said finally, crouching near her level once more. "But the evidence points to someone high-ranking. Someone who has influence over the elders. Someone who feared you, or what you represent." Serena's brow furrowed. "Me? Fear me? I am nothing. How could anyone fear me?" Fenric's gaze softened briefly, the hint of his wolf pressing against his chest. "You are an Omega, yes. But not just any Omega. You carry something they cannot control. Something they cannot ignore. That is why you were targeted. That is why they broke you. She shook her head slowly, trying to grasp the weight of his words. Fear, malice, and politics intertwined in ways she had never imagined. I don't understand. Fenric's hands clenched at his sides. You don't need to understand fully yet. What you need is to survive, to heal, and to trust me enough to let me uncover the truth. After that, you will see why they feared you. The investigation began quietly. Fenric summoned the few loyal members of his inner circle, those whose loyalty was unquestionable and whose judgment was clear. They gathered in a secluded chamber, away from the whispers and eyes of the pack, where secrets could be spoken aloud without fear of eavesdropping. There are lies, Fenric stated flatly, voice carrying the weight of command. Lies that led to an innocent Omega being tortured in our dungeon. I need names. I need evidence. And I need the truth. One of the warriors, a tall, broad-shouldered male with scars along his forearms, spoke first. My Alpha, the elders, they all acted together. But there are whispers. The one who suggested she was guilty first, it was Lysara. Serena stiffened at the name, though Fenric caught the flicker of recognition before she could hide it. Lysara, a high-ranking she-wolf in the pack, known for her ambition and cunning, had always been wary of Serena. And now, it seemed, that wariness had escalated into a calculated move to remove a perceived threat. Lysara? Fenric's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. Why? The warrior shook his head. We don't know. Rumors, perhaps jealousy, perhaps fear. She wanted the Omega gone quietly, so she orchestrated the rumors, the false witnesses, everything. The elders were manipulated, or coerced. The timing, it was precise. Serena's lips parted slightly. She felt her stomach twist with a mixture of relief and new fear. Relief that her torment had a reason, some logic, however cruel, but fear that someone she knew, someone in the inner circle, had wanted her destroyed. She did this? Fenric nodded grimly. Yes. And she will answer for it. But we cannot act recklessly. If we expose her now, she will flee or strike back. We must gather proof. Witnesses. Evidence. Anything that will show the pack the truth without risk of further harm to you. The first step was locating the false witnesses. Fenric questioned guards, patrols, and anyone who had interacted with the so-called evidence. Slowly, painstakingly, a picture began to emerge. The patrols had been bribed, coerced, or intimidated into giving false reports. Messages had been forged. Documents manipulated. And all of it led back to one orchestrator, Lysara. But uncovering this would take time. Every action had to be precise. One misstep, and the fragile trust Serena had begun to place in him could shatter entirely. Meanwhile, Serena remained in his quarters, hesitant, wary. The initial shock of her rescue had passed, but the weight of her trauma remained heavy. Every night, she relived the dungeon, the cold, the chains, the sound of boots striking flesh. Her wolf, though weak from fear and isolation, stirred with caution, sensing the Alpha's presence but hesitant to fully reveal herself. Fenric understood. He did not rush. He allowed her space, tending to her injuries, speaking softly, and offering reassurance when she was ready to hear it. And slowly, the bond began to stir, not fully awakened, but present, a faint hum beneath the layers of trauma. One evening, Serena whispered, voice barely audible, "Why me? Why would Lysara care so much about me?" Fenric knelt beside her, careful not to crowd her. "Because power is often afraid of the smallest sparks," he said. "And you carry a spark they cannot extinguish. It is why they feared you, and why they tried to break you. But they were wrong. You are stronger than they realized." Her gaze met his briefly, and for the first time since the dungeon, she allowed herself to feel a tiny shred of pride. Not for what she had endured, but for the fact that she had survived. That she was still here. That she had not broken entirely, despite everything. The next day, Fenric moved carefully to confront the pack elders. The truth had to be revealed without risking further chaos, and the gathering needed precision. He called a council, summoning the elders to a chamber where Serena could witness the process safely, under his protection. The tension in the hall was palpable. Whispers filled the room, questions half-asked and half-feared. Eyes darted to Serena, noting her presence but wary of her claim as the Alpha's mate. Fenric's gaze swept the room, sharp and commanding. Every elder, every warrior, every observer understood that the time for lies had ended. He presented the evidence, the forged documents, the coerced witnesses, the trail of manipulation that led directly to Lysara. Every piece meticulously gathered, every lie unraveled. The room grew silent as the truth became undeniable. Serena watched, her heart pounding. She felt a mix of vindication and dread. Vindication because her innocence was finally visible, dread because the realization of who had tried to destroy her, the one who had orchestrated the pain she had endured, was now laid bare. Fenric's voice cut through the silence. "This pack almost failed me. Almost failed my mate. Those responsible will be held accountable, according to pack law, without mercy. And let this be a lesson, no one will harm my mate, not while I stand as Alpha." The elders exchanged glances, some defiant, some fearful, and some realizing too late the gravity of their complicity. The first cracks of rebellion appeared in subtle ways, whispers, avoidance, the slight shift of stance, but Fenric's presence and authority suppressed them immediately. Serena felt her wolf stir beneath her ribs, hesitant but intrigued. Trust was not yet fully given, but recognition began to flicker. Fenric's words, actions, and presence reminded her that she had survived, not just the dungeon, but the lies and schemes that had threatened to erase her entirely. The Ashenclaw Hall had never felt colder. Not because of the winter winds cutting through the mountains, nor the frost that crept along the edges of the stone floors. No, this chill came from within, from the collective fear, defiance, and resentment of a pack that had been reminded it could not act against its alpha without consequences. Fenric Ashenclaw stood at the center of the main hall, Serena at his side. She had refused to speak much, her eyes still wary, but her presence was a bold statement to the pack. The Alpha had returned, the innocent had been vindicated, and yet, the elders and warriors did not respond with gratitude. They responded with hostility, thinly veiled under polite nods and forced calm. "You dare summon us here," one of the elder males hissed, voice tight with suppressed fury. His hands gripped the carved railing like he might steady himself against the storm of authority that Fenric represented. Fenric's gaze swept across the room, steady, commanding, unyielding. I do more than dare, he said, voice low, resonant, echoing through the stone chamber. I demand your attention because justice will no longer be a whisper in the shadows. It will be seen. It will be acknowledged. And it will be enforced. A ripple of murmurs passed through the gathered pack, some anxious, some angry. But none dared challenge him openly. Fenric's wolf pressed against him, tense, every instinct ready to strike at the first hint of aggression toward Serena. He motioned to Serena. She is my mate. Her innocence has been proven. Those responsible for her torment, specifically Lysara and her accomplices, will face punishment according to pack law. There will be no exceptions, no shortcuts, and no turning of a blind eye. Lysara's lips twitched in a faint smirk, though her eyes betrayed panic. The other elders shifted uncomfortably. They had counted on Serena's silence, her invisibility, and Fenric's absence to maintain their control. Now, every plan they had laid, every lie they had spun, teetered on the edge of collapse. One elder finally spoke, voice tight with anger. Alpha, do you not see that by defending her, by elevating her above the pack, you destabilize everything? Our laws, our traditions, you place one Omega above the collective order. Fenric's gaze hardened. One Omega who has been tortured and falsely accused is not above the law. She is the law's proper application. And if anyone here cannot abide by justice, then perhaps it is time the pack considers who truly deserves to lead. A murmur of fear spread. Some warriors glanced at one another, weighing whether to speak, to act, to challenge, but hesitation lingered like a blade poised in the air. Serena, sensing the tension, felt her wolf stir uneasily. The Alpha's authority was absolute, but the pack's hostility was real, palpable, pressing down upon her fragile recovery. Her instinct screamed to flee, to escape the walls that had become both sanctuary and cage. She had survived the dungeon. She had endured weeks of isolation, torment, and betrayal. Could she survive another confrontation with those who had tried to destroy her, now backed by the authority of their own numbers? That night, she made her decision. Under the cover of darkness, she moved quietly through the corridors of the Ashenclaw Hall. Each step was deliberate, calculated, her small, injured body pressed close to the shadows. She avoided the patrols, the lingering guards, anyone who might notice her absence before she reached the outer walls. Her wolf prowled beneath her, restless, whispering caution and instinct. Her heart pounded. Fear twisted with adrenaline. Freedom, or the semblance of it, was just beyond the gates. She could taste it, smell it in the night air drifting through the cracks in the stone walls. She could feel it in the icy breeze against her face. She was close. So close. Yet before she could reach the last corridor, a voice stopped her in her tracks. Serena. She froze. The sound of the Alpha's voice was quiet, low, but carried an authority she could not ignore. Slowly, cautiously, she turned. Fenric stood in the shadows, a figure of strength and calm, yet every muscle in his body radiated tension, readiness, and concern. I knew you would try, he said softly, stepping closer. And I will not allow you to leave, not because I am angry, but because the world outside is not safe for you yet. She shook her head, trembling. Safe? I was not safe here either. They tried to destroy me. I have to leave. I cannot stay and watch them, watch the pack, continue to plot, continue to lie. Fenric knelt slowly, bringing himself to her level. The proximity was deliberate, non-threatening, but commanding. His eyes held hers, unyielding. And what will happen if you leave? The pack is not fully loyal. The enemies that orchestrated your torture are still here. You would be hunted, Serena. They would not stop until you are broken again, or worse. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, hesitant. She wanted freedom, yes, but instinct screamed the truth. Fenric was right. Leaving now was dangerous. Staying was also dangerous. Trust had to be weighed carefully, step by step. I cannot trust anyone, she whispered. Not the pack. Not anyone. Not you. Fenric's jaw tightened. His wolf growled low in his chest. He could have asserted himself by force, could have claimed her immediately, but he did not. He understood the weight of trauma. The scars of fear were not erased with authority alone. Instead, he did something unexpected. He lowered his head, resting his forehead lightly against hers. Not overpowering, not demanding, just contact, just connection. His voice, barely audible, trembled with emotion. I kneel before you, mate, he whispered. Not as an alpha demanding obedience. Not as a king issuing orders. I kneel before you as a man asking forgiveness. Asking for trust. Asking for a chance to prove that I will not fail you again. Not now, not ever. Her breath hitched. She pressed her palms against his chest, feeling the warmth, the strength, the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her hands. Every nerve screamed, every instinct warned, yet her wolf stirred with cautious recognition. Tears ran down her face, catching in the candlelight like liquid silver. You, kneel, she whispered, voice cracking. You kneel to me? He nodded, forehead still touching hers. Because you deserve respect, Serena. Because you have survived. Because I cannot undo the past, but I can choose to stand with you now. And I will, every moment, until the world itself ends. For the first time in weeks, her chest felt the faintest relief, though it was laced with lingering fear. The Alpha's kneeling did not erase the past, but it created a space, a fragile, tentative space, for trust to grow. Yet the night was far from over. From the shadows, murmurs stirred. Warriors who had observed from afar whispered among themselves, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. The pack was divided. Some admired Fenric's devotion, some feared his power, and others still resented Serena's presence at his side. The first real signs of rebellion, quiet, subtle, dangerous, were already forming. Serena, understanding the danger, clung to Fenric instinctively. Not yet in full acceptance, not yet in full trust, but in recognition of the bond that neither cruelty, nor chains, nor absence could erase. The Alpha rose slowly, lifting her gaze to meet the growing murmurs in the hall. Let all who question loyalty or justice remember this, he said, voice resonant, unwavering. No one will harm my mate. No one will undermine this pack while I am Alpha. And all who challenge me will face the consequences. Do you understand? The hall was silent. Every warrior, every elder, every pack member understood that challenge was futile. Fenric Ashenclaw's word, his presence, his wolf, and now the bond with Serena, his mate, formed an unbreakable wall of authority. Serena clung to him, her trembling subsiding, wolf stirring beneath her skin, aware that while fear had not yet vanished, protection, and perhaps, for the first time, safety, was real. The night passed with uneasy calm. No one challenged the Alpha openly again that evening. Yet the seeds of rebellion, of distrust, lingered in the air like frost waiting for sunlight to melt. And Serena knew, deep within her bones, that the trials were far from over. Trust had begun, but enemies, both hidden and known, still lingered. She would need every ounce of strength, every fragment of courage, and every spark of the bond forming between her and the Alpha to survive what was to come. For the Ashenclaw Pack, the true reckoning was only just beginning. The morning sun barely pierced the thick stone walls of Fenric's private chambers, painting the room in muted streaks of gold and gray. Serena sat on the edge of her cot, arms wrapped around her knees, staring blankly at the floor. Though weeks had passed since her rescue, the echoes of chains and harsh whispers still haunted her. Healing, she realized, was a slow and painful process. But healing did not equal trust, and it certainly did not equal love. Fenric watched her from across the room, seated in a chair carved from the dark timber of the Ashenclaw Mountains. His hands rested loosely on his knees, fingers flexing with barely restrained tension. He could see the tremors in her shoulders, the way her wolf flickered with caution beneath her skin. She was recovering physically, slowly, but emotionally, she remained guarded, distant, fractured. "Eat," he said simply, placing a plate of warm bread and dried meat on a small table beside her cot. "Your body needs strength." Serena shook her head. "I'm not hungry," she whispered. Her voice was soft, hoarse, and cautious. She had learned that asserting control over the small aspects of her life, like whether to eat, was one of the few things she could claim for herself. Fenric's wolf stirred in his chest, restless, impatient. But he suppressed it. His mate's trauma could not be ignored or rushed. He had to let her choose, even if it pained him to see her deny sustenance. "Then drink," he said, placing a cup of water in front of her. "At least that. Hydration will help your body heal." Serena's gaze flicked to him briefly, hesitant. She took the cup, trembling, and sipped slowly. Her wolf pressed against her chest, wary yet curious, feeling the Alpha's presence through the room, measuring him, weighing him. Fenric exhaled slowly, rising to his feet. "I will not force you to eat, to speak, or to trust me," he said softly, moving closer but stopping at a respectful distance. "But I will not leave your side. Healing is a process. And though it may not feel like it, you are not alone." Her hands shook as she set the cup down, and she looked away. "I don't know how to trust anymore," she whispered. "Not after what they did. Not after the dungeon. Not after everything." Fenric's wolf growled low in his chest. His hands itched to take her into his arms, to protect her, to shield her from the lingering darkness. But he understood, forcing closeness now would only deepen the fractures. Instead, he knelt slowly before her, meeting her gaze with calm, unwavering eyes. "You do not have to trust me yet," he said. "You do not have to accept the bond, the mate claim, or my protection fully. But you do have to believe that I will never let harm come to you again. That much, I promise." Serena's lips trembled. A tear slid down her cheek, catching the faint light like a droplet of silver. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, sensing the sincerity, the weight of the Alpha's words. Yet instinct and fear wove tightly around her, holding her heart in cautious imprisonment. I don't know if I can," she admitted. Her voice cracked, weak and raw. "I don't know if I can ever feel safe, not after what they did to me." Fenric's gaze softened. "Then you do not need to feel safe all at once. One step at a time. One breath at a time. Healing does not happen in leaps. It happens in fragments, moments, and choices. And I will remain for every one of them." She swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the floor, torn between fear and a faint glimmer of hope. For the first time in weeks, she considered that perhaps she was not entirely alone. The days passed in a delicate, tense rhythm. Fenric maintained a careful balance of protection and patience. He tended to her injuries, guided her slowly through meals, and ensured that no one from the pack who might harm her could approach without his explicit permission. He observed her closely, reading the subtle signs of her wolf, watching for the faint flickers of fear, hesitation, or recognition. Serena began to move more freely, though still with caution. She avoided the more crowded areas of the hall, lingering near the outer walls where she could watch the mountains stretch beyond the pack lands. Her wolf, still tentative, pressed against her, sensing the Alpha's presence even when he was across the room. Slowly, imperceptibly, a fragile thread of trust began to form, not in words, not in feelings, but in silent acknowledgement of his constancy. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the jagged peaks, Fenric invited her to walk with him through the outer courtyard. The snow crunched beneath their feet, cold and crisp. Serena hesitated at first, but the Alpha's presence beside her was steady, grounding. "Do you always walk so close to danger?" she asked softly, voice almost a whisper. Fenric glanced at her, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "I have always walked where I am needed," he replied. "And right now, I am needed here, with you." Her wolf stirred uneasily at the tone of authority and tenderness entwined in his words. She looked at him, unsure whether to resist or accept the comfort he offered. You don't understand," she murmured. "Healing is not love. Surviving is not trust. Just because I'm alive doesn't mean I feel safe with you, or anyone." Fenric nodded, stepping closer, his hand hovering near hers without touching. "I understand. Healing is not love. Surviving is not trust. But surviving alongside someone who will not abandon you, that is a start. And sometimes, a start is all we can hope for." The corners of her mouth twitched in the faintest shadow of a smile. She did not speak, did not allow herself to relax entirely, but the acknowledgement, small and fragile, was there. But the Ashenclaw Pack was never quiet for long. While Serena focused on her slow recovery, whispers and plots swirled among the discontented members. Lysara, humiliated yet cunning, began rallying those who had doubted Fenric's authority, weaving stories of favoritism, manipulation, and danger. Every day brought new tension. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. Fenric knew this. He had seen it in the careful glances, the suppressed grumbles, and the way some warriors lingered near the outer walls, watching Serena with suspicion. Protecting her was not merely about tending to wounds or offering gentle reassurance, it was about strategy, vigilance, and anticipation. Every movement, every word, had to be precise. One night, Serena awoke to a faint noise outside the chamber. Footsteps. Whispered words. The subtle scrape of boots on stone. Her wolf growled, low and menacing, instinctively alert. Fenric was immediately awake beside her, senses sharp, muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike. "Stay behind me," he whispered, voice steady, commanding. "Do not move." The door creaked slightly. A shadow passed the threshold, Lysara, daring and reckless, eyes glinting with malice. Fenric's hand moved in a blur, blocking the path between Serena and the intruder. "You dare?" Fenric's voice was calm, but the weight behind it crushed the air. "Do you not understand that my mate is under my protection? That any harm coming to her will be your undoing?" Lysara sneered, but faltered under the intensity of his gaze. "She is weak. Frightened. Your bond is meaningless if she cannot even defend herself." Fenric's wolf growled, fierce and raw. "Weak?" His hands gripped Lysara's shoulders with controlled strength, not to harm, but to assert dominance. "Weakness is surviving torture, betrayal, and false accusations, and still standing before me. Weakness is claiming her mate, not to dominate, but to protect. Weakness is the courage you will never understand." Serena's wolf stirred, sensing the Alpha's fury, trembling yet proud. Though she did not speak, her presence radiated silent strength, the first spark of her own defiance and awakening bond. Lysara retreated, fear finally overtaking arrogance. But the encounter left Serena shaken. Trauma, fear, and the awareness of the constant danger pressed against her like ice. Fenric wrapped his arms around her gently, not demanding closeness, but offering support, grounding her. "You are safe now," he whispered, voice low, almost a chant. "Even when enemies linger, I am here. Your healing will take time. Your trust will take longer. But I will not fail you." Serena allowed herself a single nod, closing her eyes, letting the faintest fragment of relief seep into her. Her wolf remained cautious, but it had begun to recognize the constancy, the unwavering presence of the Alpha who had claimed her, not with force, but with patience. The road ahead would not be easy. Healing was a journey. Trust was a battle. Love was far away, almost unimaginable. But for the first time since her capture, Serena felt a whisper of something she had not felt in weeks, hope. And Fenric knew, as he held her in the quiet of the night, that no power, no conspiracy, and no enemy could break the bond that had begun to root between them. The Ashenclaw Hall had never been quieter, or more tense. The murmurs and whispers of the pack had quieted, but the air was thick with anticipation, suspicion, and unspoken questions. Every warrior, every elder, every observer felt it. Something was coming, something that would shake the foundations of the pack. Fenric Ashenclaw, the Alpha King, sensed it too. His wolf prowled within him, restless, sniffing out deceit, hunting for the lies that had festered too long. Serena sat near the window of the Alpha's chambers, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her eyes followed the snow drifting lazily along the mountain ridges, but her mind was sharp, alert. Though her physical healing was nearly complete, her wolf remained cautious, wary of every shadow, every whisper. She had survived betrayal once, and she would not be caught unaware again. Fenric entered silently, his cloak brushing the floor. He knelt beside her, eyes scanning the valley below, then back to hers. "We have identified the mastermind," he said quietly, voice like steel softened by concern. "The one who orchestrated your torture and the false accusations. It is not just Lysara. She was a pawn." Serina's brow furrowed. "A pawn? Then, who is behind this?" Fenric's gaze hardened. "Syrian Vale. The council elder you trusted, the one who always spoke for the supposed good of the pack. He manipulated Lysara, the guards, even the evidence. Every step, every lie, every false witness traced back to him." Her stomach twisted. Syrian Vale was known for his charm, his wisdom, and his influence over the elders. No one had suspected him. "Why?" she whispered. "Why target me?" Fenric's wolf growled low in his chest. "Because you threaten his power. Because your bond to me, once fully recognized, will unify this pack under my authority. He cannot allow that. He cannot allow a mate to rise, to gain influence, to be seen as a figure beyond his control. So he used fear, lies, and cruelty to break you before you could find your strength." Serina shivered, pressing her hands to her arms. Her wolf pressed against her ribs, sensing the danger, sensing the truth in Fenric's words. "And, he is still here?" "Yes," Fenric said firmly. "Still plotting. Still waiting for weakness to exploit. We cannot confront him openly yet, not until we have proof that cannot be denied, not until the pack cannot ignore it. He will strike if he senses our hand too early." The weight of the revelation pressed down on her. She had survived the dungeon, the false accusations, the bruises, the chains, but now she understood that the danger was far from over. Syrian Vale's schemes had not ended. The enemies had simply hidden their faces behind carefully constructed lies. The Alpha wasted no time. He summoned a council of loyal warriors and strategists, including a few elders whose loyalty had been proven beyond doubt. "Syrian Vale will be revealed," Fenric said, pacing the chamber, voice carrying the authority of the mountains themselves. "But we cannot rush. Precision is everything. Any mistake, any misstep, and he will escape, or worse, strike at my mate again." The plan was meticulous. Surveillance, observation, and subtle questioning would unravel the council elders' lies. Fenric knew that Serina's presence could be both a shield and a catalyst. Her wolf, though still cautious, was strong. Her bond with him, though not fully awakened, provided insights he could not ignore. She could feel deception in ways that humans and unbonded wolves could not. Over the following days, they observed. They listened. They noted every irregularity, every subtle act of manipulation, every whispered conversation. And slowly, the web of Syrian's conspiracy began to unravel. Documents that had seemed innocuous now revealed hidden messages. Guards who had appeared loyal now faltered under questioning. Witnesses' memories conflicted when subtly prompted. One evening, Serina accompanied Fenric in the observation chamber, standing quietly behind him as he reviewed reports. Her wolf pressed against him, sensing the faint tension radiating from the guards who were unaware of their scrutiny. "Do you really think he is capable of this?" she whispered. Fenric did not look at her immediately. His gaze swept the valley, the mountains, the pack grounds. "Power corrupts," he said finally. "And some men, some wolves, cannot bear to see their authority questioned. Syrian Vale is intelligent, patient, and ruthless. He believes control is his right, and he will stop at nothing to maintain it. That is why he underestimated you. Her heart stuttered. Underestimated me? Yes, he said, eyes locking with hers. Your survival, your resilience, your bond to me, he did not see it coming. And that is why he will fail. The confrontation came suddenly. Syrian Vale, confident in his manipulation, had summoned the council for what he believed would be a final act, the permanent exile of Serena under the guise of order and tradition. He did not anticipate Fenric's careful preparation. He did not anticipate Serena's own growing strength. Fenric entered the council chamber with quiet authority. Serena followed, her posture cautious but proud. Her wolf pressed against her, alert, aware, and protective. The elders, the council, the warriors, they all sensed the tension, the danger, the storm about to be unleashed. Syrian Vale rose as Fenric approached, his smile charming, his voice smooth. Alpha. I see you bring the Omega, he said, feigning amusement. Do you intend to speak for her? Fenric's gaze sharpened. I intend to speak for the truth, he said. And the truth is this: you have orchestrated lies, manipulated the pack, and sought to destroy an innocent Omega for your own gain. Your actions will be revealed, and you will answer to the pack for every injustice you have committed. Serena stepped forward, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. I was accused. I was tortured. I was blamed for things I did not do. You set me up. You used fear to control the pack, and now the truth will be seen. Syrian's confident facade faltered. He glanced around the room, noting the growing attention of the loyal warriors and the whispered confirmations from previously intimidated witnesses. Fenric had prepared meticulously. Every lie was challenged, every false witness accounted for. You cannot prove it, Syrian hissed, desperation creeping into his voice. Fenric's wolf growled beneath his skin. Watch carefully, he said. Evidence is not simply words. Evidence is truth, undeniable, documented, witnessed. And you have left a trail even your cunning cannot erase. One by one, the manipulated witnesses came forward under Fenric's careful prompting. The guards confessed to coercion, the documents were revealed as forgeries, and the hidden messages in council records were laid bare. Syrian Vale's deception collapsed piece by piece. Serena watched, heart pounding, as the Alpha's strategy unfolded flawlessly. Her wolf pressed against her chest, sensing his dominance, his protection, his unwavering authority. And for the first time, she felt a spark, not of full trust, not yet, but of recognition. Fenric had not failed her. He had controlled the chaos, protected her, and unveiled the enemy without putting her in further danger. Syrian Vale's fury boiled over. This is treachery, he shouted, voice cracking. You cannot. Fenric's hand shot out, gripping the elder's shoulder with controlled force. Silence, he said, voice like stone. The pack will judge you. Your lies have been exposed. Your manipulation revealed. You have no defense. You will answer for your crimes, starting now. The council erupted into murmurs, whispers, some fearful, some indignant. But the truth was clear, undeniable, and absolute. Syrian Vale, once untouchable, now stood exposed, powerless before the authority of the Alpha and the resilience of his mate. Serina's wolf stirred strongly beneath her skin, sensing victory, protection, and justice. She had survived, yes, but she had also begun to understand her own strength. The dungeon, the lies, the betrayal, they had not broken her. They had forged a resilience that, coupled with Fenric's guidance, made her a force to be reckoned with. Fenric turned to her, eyes softening slightly. "The enemy is revealed," he said quietly. "But this is only the beginning. Trust, healing, and bond, they will take time. And the pack, they will need guidance to follow us." Serina nodded, wolf alert but calm. Her voice was soft but firm. "Then let us guide them." The night draped the Ashenclaw Mountains in darkness, the pale light of the moon glinting off frost-laden peaks. Silence stretched over the pack lands, but it was the kind of silence that hides danger, a tension in the air, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Fenric Ashenclaw's wolf prowled beneath his skin, alert, restless. Even after Syrian Vale's exposure, the threat had not ended. Shadows moved within the pack, whispers lingered, and some warriors, still loyal to the disgraced elder, had begun plotting vengeance. Serina stood near the window of the Alpha's chamber, eyes scanning the snow-covered courtyard. Her body was stronger now, her scars fading, her wolf more aware, more assertive. And yet, she remained cautious. The nightmares still visited, chains still haunted her sleep, and trust was a fragile, brittle thing she could barely allow herself to acknowledge. Fenric approached quietly, his footsteps soft against the stone floor. He rested a hand on the window frame near her shoulder, close enough to be protective, distant enough not to crowd her. "The pack stirs," he said quietly, voice low but firm. "Even with Syrian gone, his followers plot. Shadows linger. We must be vigilant." Serina's eyes met his, wolf and human alike sensing the tension beneath his calm words. They will not stop," she whispered. Fenric's jaw tightened. "No. Enemies do not disappear simply because their leader is exposed. They adapt. They wait. They strike when least expected." Her chest tightened. The fear she had worked to temper surged again, but this time tempered with a small ember of defiance. She had survived chains, lies, and manipulation. She could survive this. She would survive this. The first signs of rebellion came subtly. Guards who had once whispered loyalty now shifted uneasily in their patrols. Elder wolves, wary but resentful of Fenric's growing influence and Serina's presence, began gathering quietly in corners, eyes flicking with suspicion. One night, Serina heard faint footsteps outside her chamber, a shadow sliding past the door. Her wolf growled, muscles coiled, instincts sharp. Fenric appeared immediately, as though drawn by the faintest ripple of threat. "Stay behind me," he whispered, his hand hovering near the dagger at his belt. "Do not move." The shadow paused at the threshold. A figure stepped forward, one of Syrian's remaining followers, attempting a silent threat. Fenric's wolf pressed against him, sharp, dangerous, coiled for attack. With a single, precise motion, he blocked the intruder's path, his presence enough to stop aggression before it began. "Your allegiance ends tonight," Fenric said quietly, voice like steel. "Leave now, or face the consequences." I will not hesitate. The figure hesitated, lips twitching in defiance, but Fenric's unyielding gaze, the power of the Alpha, and the quiet presence of Serena behind him forced retreat. The shadow slipped back into the darkness, leaving the night tense but quiet. Serena's wolf relaxed slightly, sensing safety, but remained alert. Her human side trembled, not from fear alone, but from the realization that danger was constant. Trust, she knew, was still fragile. Bond, she knew, was still distant. The following day, Fenric organized a gathering of loyal warriors to strategize. Serena accompanied him, silent but present. Her wolf pressed against her ribs, cautious but proud. She was learning, absorbing the rhythms of the pack, sensing deception, understanding loyalty. Fenric recognized it, and though he did not say so aloud, he was impressed. Her resilience was not just emotional, it was instinctive. We must root out the factions loyal to Syrian, Fenric said, pacing the chamber. Subtlety is key. We cannot afford open conflict just yet. Any misstep could embolden them or endanger you, Serena. She nodded slowly. I understand. But, how do we find them? Fenric's eyes met hers, sharp, calculated. Observation. Listening. Patience. The weak, the guilty, will reveal themselves. And when they do, we act swiftly. Her wolf stirred with intrigue. She could sense danger in ways others could not, subtle shifts in posture, the faintest glances, hidden whispers. Together with Fenric's authority, they were a formidable pair, though she did not yet fully realize it. As days passed, the plot thickened. A faction of discontented warriors conspired to attack the Alpha during a training session, intending to capture or harm Serena in the process. Fenric, always vigilant, anticipated the strike. He positioned loyalists strategically, prepared for every possible move. The confrontation came suddenly. Shadows lunged from the tree line surrounding the training grounds. Fenric's wolf erupted, primal, violent, coiling every muscle for defense. Serena's wolf pressed beneath her skin, sensing imminent danger. Though she did not move, instinct guided her, alerting Fenric to the subtle shifts of the attackers. Stay behind me, Fenric growled, drawing his blade. The attackers, confident in numbers but unprepared for the Alpha's strategy and his mate's subtle guidance, faltered. One by one, loyal warriors neutralized the threats. Fenric's presence was unyielding, protective, and precise, every movement calculated to protect Serena first, then subdue the attackers without unnecessary bloodshed. After the skirmish, Serena pressed close to him, wolf and human intertwined, trembling but alive. I thought they would get me, she whispered. Fenric knelt, placing a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. I will never let them. Not while I stand. Not while I breathe. You are mine, Serena. Not just in word, but in action. And every threat to you will end before it reaches you. Her wolf, trembling initially, pressed against him now with cautious recognition. Trust had not yet blossomed fully, but it had begun, a fragile thread woven through fear, protection, and unspoken understanding. That night, the pack remained restless. The shadows of revenge lingered, conspiracies whispered quietly in the corridors, and some elders remained resentful. Yet for Serena, the Alpha's unwavering vigilance created a rare sense of safety. She did not yet speak of bond, mate, or love, but she began to acknowledge the presence of someone who would never fail her, someone whose authority and patience could stand against even the darkest machinations of the pack. Fenric, too, felt the shift. His wolf, restless, finally began to relax slightly, sensing Serina's growing strength, her cautious confidence, and the faint stirrings of recognition. They were becoming a unit, silent, powerful, and dangerous to any who would threaten them. The shadows of revenge would not dissipate easily. Syrian's followers remained hidden, plotting, waiting for the moment to strike again. But the bond between Fenric and Serina, though not fully awakened, not yet complete, was a force the pack could not ignore. It was patience, protection, and subtle power, wrapped in a growing respect and cautious trust. And Serina, standing in the quiet of the moonlit chamber, finally allowed herself the tiniest spark of hope. Though healing was slow, trust fragile, and danger ever present, she realized something profound: she was no longer alone. Not in the pack. Not in the mountain shadows. Not in life itself. Fenric stood silently beside her, eyes scanning the snowy grounds, wolf alert, mind sharp. "The shadows linger," he whispered. "But together, we are stronger than any threat." Serina pressed lightly against him, wolf and human intertwined. She did not yet speak, did not yet claim bond, but she felt it, subtle, undeniable, and growing, the beginning of a connection that would weather every shadow, every plot, and every enemy. And in the silence of the Ashenclaw Mountains, the first real sense of balance began to form. The dawn broke over the Ashenclaw Mountains with an intensity that matched the tension still lingering in the pack. Golden sunlight poured through the frost-laden pines, reflecting against the icy peaks, illuminating the halls of Ashenclaw with a brilliance that felt almost unnatural after weeks of darkness, fear, and shadow. Yet, within the hall, the air was thick with anticipation. The final confrontation, the resolution of treachery, and the awakening of an unbreakable bond were all imminent. Serina stood at the edge of the main courtyard, her wolf beneath her skin stirring with anticipation. Her body had regained its strength, her mind was sharpened, and her spirit, once tentative, fractured, was now tempered by survival, resilience, and the quiet guidance of Fenric. The trauma still lingered, as it always would, but it no longer defined her. She was ready, not fully trusting, but aware that she was no longer a pawn in the pack's games. Fenric appeared beside her silently, his presence calm but formidable, wolf coiled and ready beneath his skin. "Today," he said quietly, voice resonant and steady, "we finish what was begun. The pack will see truth, justice, and strength, not just mine, but ours, together." Serina's eyes met his. Though her wolf still hummed with caution, she allowed herself a single nod, recognizing not just his protection, but the emerging connection between them. The bond they had shared in fragments, in survival, in patience, was finally ready to awaken fully. The Alpha's approach to the gathering of the pack was deliberate. No chaos, no threats, only controlled authority. The courtyard filled with warriors, elders, and pack members, their faces a mixture of awe, fear, and resentment. They had witnessed Fenric's power, his protection of Serina, and the exposure of Syrian Vale's treachery. Now, they would witness the final awakening of the bond that would solidify the Alpha's authority and the Omega's rightful place at his side. Fenric motioned for Serina to step forward. She obeyed, wolf and human intertwined, her posture careful but resolute. The murmurs of the crowd rose, whispers of doubt and awe mixing into a tense symphony. Fenric's gaze swept the gathered pack, sharp and commanding. "You have seen lies," he began, voice carrying across the courtyard, "betrayal, deception, and attempts to manipulate this pack for personal gain. But the truth remains, loyalty, courage, and resilience define leadership. And strength, true strength, is not just power, it is protection, honor, and trust." All eyes shifted to Serena, who stood at his side, her wolf flickering beneath her skin, instincts sharp, ready. Her voice, though quiet, carried over the assembly. "I was broken," she said, "I was betrayed, and I was accused of crimes I did not commit. But I survived. I am here, standing, because the Alpha protected me, because I survived, because I am stronger than the chains and lies placed upon me." A ripple of shock moved through the pack. Few expected the Omega to speak, to assert herself, to claim her presence openly. And yet, she did so with courage, her wolf pressing strongly against her, signaling awareness, strength, and the readiness to claim her role. Fenric stepped forward, placing his hand lightly over hers. The moment was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it carried the weight of centuries of instinct, of authority, and of bond. His wolf pressed against hers, and a spark, faint at first, then undeniable, blazed between them. The mate bond, patient and cautious for so long, now began to awaken fully, a pulsing connection that resonated through both of them. "You are mine," Fenric said, voice low but carrying across the courtyard. "Not as a claim, but as a bond forged through trials, trust, and survival. You are my mate, Serena. Not for the pack's approval, but for truth. And together, we will lead this pack stronger than it has ever been." Her wolf surged beneath her skin, a coiled, trembling force of recognition and acceptance. She pressed lightly against his hand, feeling the connection spark, binding them in a mate bond that was as much spiritual as it was instinctual. Her breath caught, not from fear, but from the awareness that this bond was no longer just a possibility, it was real, alive, and unbreakable. The pack's reaction was immediate. Some warriors knelt instinctively, recognizing the Alpha's authority and the strength of the bond. Others, resentful or fearful, remained rigid, faces tight with unease. But even they could not deny the truth, Serena was no longer a victim. She was no longer fragile. She was a force, standing beside the Alpha, her wolf in sync with his, her presence commanding, her strength undeniable. Lasara, ever defiant, tried to muster rebellion, but the Alpha's gaze alone silenced her. "The time for plots and shadows has ended," Fenric said. "The bond of mate and Alpha is sacred, and it will not be challenged. Any who seek to disrupt it will answer to the pack, and to me, without hesitation." The final remnants of Syrian Vale's followers, seeing the truth laid bare and the mate bond awakened, finally faltered. Some fled, unwilling to face the consequences. Others surrendered quietly, understanding that resistance was futile against the unity of Alpha and mate. Serena's wolf, now fully awake, pulsed within her, a fierce, proud energy. She stepped forward, not in submission, not in fear, but in strength. "I claim my role," she said, voice steady and clear. "Not just as the Alpha's mate, but as a protector, a guide, and a part of this pack's future. I will not hide. I will not fear. I will lead alongside him, in truth and strength. The courtyard erupted into a mix of awe and respect. The mate bond had awakened fully, and with it, a new era for the Ashenclaw Pack had begun. Fenric, standing beside her, allowed himself a rare, small smile. His wolf pressed against hers in recognition, not dominance, but unity. They were two halves of a whole, alpha and mate, protector and survivor, wolf and human intertwined in strength, trust, and recognition. In the days that followed, the Ashenclaw Pack slowly adjusted to the new reality. The authority of Fenric was unquestioned, solidified by the awakening of the mate bond. Serena, once fragile and cautious, now carried herself with quiet confidence, aware of her power, her voice, and her role in shaping the pack's future. The remaining conspirators were either expelled or integrated under strict supervision, their influence permanently broken. The lessons were clear: loyalty, courage, and truth were the pillars of leadership. Deception, manipulation, and betrayal could no longer thrive. And through it all, the bond between Fenric and Serena continued to deepen. It was not yet full love, not yet complete trust, but it was alive, breathing, and undeniable, a mate bond forged in survival, tempered in adversity, and awakened in truth. At night, they would walk the mountain paths together, Serena's wolf finally relaxed, matching the rhythm of Fenric's. Words were few, but presence spoke volumes. Protection, respect, trust, and recognition flowed silently between them, stronger than chains, stronger than shadows, stronger than the pack's darkest plots. And as the moon rose over the peaks, bathing the Ashenclaw Hall in silver light, Serena finally allowed herself to believe in something she had thought impossible, that she was no longer a victim, no longer broken, no longer alone. She was a mate. She was strong. She was bonded. Fenric placed his hand over hers once more, wolf pressing against wolf beneath their skin. "We are stronger together," he whispered. "Always." And in that moment, Serena understood fully: the bond had awakened. Their journey was far from over, but together, they were unstoppable. If you love this dark, thrilling romance and want to see more twists, secrets, and werewolf love stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Don't miss a single part of our stories here on Emmys Romance Collections. Comment below which character shocked you the most, and share this video with anyone who loves intense romance and suspense. Stay with us, the next story will be even darker, even more passionate.